Today we're covering a pretty darn rough report. Basically, right, whenever you get a company, that company's in a whole bunch of trouble, and then you get another company, and you smash them into the other company in order to fix that trouble, it can be pretty damn tricky for the people involved, but that is what is happening with Diablo 4. I think, rather bombshell-ish report has dropped in which a whole bunch of people working on this project have been interviewed. Of course, this is in the context of the game getting its release date be revealed at the Game Awards. And also, that was in and around the same time that a whole bunch of people were able to post their experiences from the closed beta. That does include larger outlets, like, say, SkillUp, but it's not just people in the press. As an example, Night Stalker, one of the people who's watched our content for a very long time, also was in that beta. Now, the beta broadly has been received very, very well. However, that beta is a slice of the game. It is not the entire game, and now we've got to get into this situation. So this is reporting from Shannon Liao. She reached out to 15 current and former Activision Blizzard employees. Now, there's a lot of context swirling around this story. First, of course, the Federal Trade Commission of the United States is suing to block the merger with Microsoft. Diablo 4 was rebooted 5-ish years ago. That's when Josh Mosquera, I believe, left the company. He was one of the people who was really the figurehead of Loot 2.0 and Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls, the expansion widely seen to have massively repaired Diablo 3. But unfortunately, even though D3 could have went a lot further, Blizzard executives canned further expansions to the point where Reaper of Souls really couldn't have done anything to have saved that game in the mind of those execs. They may have thought they were being smart, but I think the ensuing massive void of Diablo content shows us that they likely made a fairly pivotal mistake. That is a mistake that was not made, though, by Bobby and his cronies. Rather, it was made by Mike Morhaime. So even the people that have generally been likable can make mistakes too. Now, Diablo 2 Resurrected has been a big success. Diablo Immortal, very sadly, also seems to have been a success. D4 slated to come out the 6th of June 2023. However, that is far from the first release date that game has had, as we are soon going to find out. And while Blizzard has been messing around with Diablo, not really accomplishing much, Path of Exile, of course, has came out and absolutely done incredibly. Okay, crunchy drive to the finish. The Diablo team has been losing talent for over a year, as employees look for more competitive wages and better work conditions elsewhere. This is an interesting thing. I get the impression from the overall reporting here that the attrition issues have really kicked in over the last year. Soon, we're going to learn perhaps why. One group here of about 20 developers who are working on a portion of the game saw about half of its members leave within a year, according to 2 former employees. The topic of attrition is not something the Blizzard commented on when they responded to Shannon. Now, they did do a response. They did say that with game development in general, and D4 specifically, it's an iterative process where scope evolves over time. Production on the game is going extremely well. Overtime is voluntary and limited to specific teams. We regularly survey the team on professional well-being, and the latest results are the most positive they've been in years. If that's true, it certainly sounds good. But that is not the picture that is being painted by this reporting. However, you may say, this is probably just biased reporting from journalists who are looking for a story. Well, 15 people, that's quite a few people to talk to. Now, it does appear to be a bit more clustered with Blizzard Albany, which is the group of devs who were thrown into this big mixing pot. They may have a slightly more negative bias, given that this is a situation that they were really thrown onto without really being asked. That being said, I did put out the feelers, I did poke around, and I would certainly say that after my poking around, of sort of in the know situations, yeah, quite a lot of this report, I think, is reflecting the situation that is going on surrounding the development of this game, and I'm like 99% sure there's no crossover between myself and Shannon, so interesting there. And as for the impact of this crunch, I think this quote from one of the employees really just does say it all. Previously, it's ruined relationships I've been where no one wants to date someone who barely has the time for them, for months at a time, at least once a year, if not more. Yeah, massive, massive issue, right? And that is the sort of thing that, almost regardless of money in other situations, that is going to completely derail somebody's personal life, because perhaps in another timeline, it could have went well. Maybe that relationship could have blossomed. Maybe all the things that employee dreamt of could have came to pass. They will then, of course, be able to torment themselves over this fact as time goes on. And as much as making peace with that is just a part of being human, it certainly is a pretty damn vital part of being human, as is having a job, and these things do need to be in balance. I would say that most good things do compound over time. One of those things is one's applying themselves to their craft and a degree of tenure with a company. And that does require the company to make a hell of a lot of effort in that relationship, because you have to be attractive to an employee. You can't just take work for granted. This is a current employee who is describing often working 12-hour days. It's affected my health, my relationships, both family and romantic. It affects my ability just to enjoy things. That absolutely is the case. I have stupidly put myself through protracted crunch in the past, and yes, my physical health, my mental health, my romantic relationship, friend relationships. I mean, I'm sure many of us have been through this, and it absolutely is the case. The difference is I can only blame myself because I'm self-employed. It's a little bit different when you're in a pretty funky power dynamic, isn't it? Now, to move on, we do have Bobby, I'll have you killed Kotick, of course, the CEO of Activision Blizzard. So, in the wake of the lawsuit from the California Department of Equal Employment and Housing, Bobby had the gall to say that, when responding to the stock price of Activision Blizzard dipping, that Diablo 4's delay, which was mentioned in an investor call, that had more of an impact on their stock than the DEFH case. And here's the quote: "We felt very much like he just drove the bus over on top of us," said a male former Diablo 4 team lead. So that's somebody who, I think that the male bit is being included there to perhaps say maybe this person had less of a very direct personal horse in the race regarding some of the, the harassment and things like that. Of course, those things can happen both ways, but I think this is a situation where it was primarily male on female. I think we could all agree with that. So I think that's why that's being noted there. But yes, imagine you are in this team, you've had a decently tumultuous development period, and when it's very obvious that the case had a large part to do with the stock, to have your boss, the person who's supposed to be your advocate, kind of blaming it on your team's performance, or perhaps overhyping the lack of a D4 delivery as the reason for the dip, that is going to feel absolutely terrible. Very bad leadership from Bobby Kotick, but that's exactly what we've really became very used to. Bobby Kotick does seem to be a, person who makes business decisions, right? But one aspect of business is the leadership of people. And I think that's somewhere where Bobby Kotick is obviously absolutely terrible. I mean, hell, the direct-to-camera address to his own employees that he gave in the wake of all this, his, honestly, on-camera conduct was so hollow, so lacking in humanity that, yeah, he's not a great leader. And not all people are great leaders of others, but they should recognize that and not place themselves in a leadership position, or else they will deal damage, not only to their employees, but also to long-term shareholder value. Because, of course, we all do remember when Activision Blizzard was able to be, up around the hundreds in terms of dollars. World of Warcraft has its problems, Diablo has its problems, and the dam finally busts. That goes down. That's an example of Bobby Kotick's leadership being very bad for shareholder value. People may think, wow, Microsoft want to acquire them for $95. Well, guess what? Their stock price was 104, I believe, at roughly an all-time high in a market that was broadly going up. What's going on there? If they had not been torpedoed by this, where would that shareholder value be? Exactly. Now to continue. Incentives and attrition. Attrition is going to murder your company. Incentives are one way to try to stem the tide. There is context here. Of course, the FTC doing their suing. Historically, that Blizzard took advantage of employee passion in their intellectual properties to essentially underpay and overwork. Did they do this actively as a policy? I think it is looking like yes. Also, it's the sort of thing where employee passion will mean that employees will underplay issues they have in the workplace, be less effective advocates for their own situation, and therefore will not really be nudging change in the company. Now, they say that crunch isn't mandatory, but of course the staff working on the project will care and they'll want to ship a good game. They'll also want to do well by their coworkers. Current incentives include a $25 DoorDash credit to people who work for more than 10 hours a day, also some bonuses and stock options. Now, these stock options are interesting. They're detailed by Shannon's sources. They're ranging from $5,000 to $50,000 depending on seniority. But I do want to talk about the DoorDash credit here because this is the sort of thing that's a little bit tricky. Because look, if stuff's really shitty at work and everyone just knows they're in the same boat, and your boss just says, right, look, we're ordering pizza for the room. That's good, right? That's supporting your team. I think that's the sort of thing that is a bit more acceptable, perhaps only when the boss themselves is working with that team and not instituting it as, some sort of policy. So you can see that working in some contexts, right? But it can become, of course, like all things, a bit nuanced. Here's a great example. What if you're working in quality assurance, a department that regularly could be seeing hourly wages of $13? Now, we do believe that there have been QA, raises, but bad QA pay totally falls within the scope of this game's development. Now, if you are going to find out, okay, so hang on, I get 2 hours of overtime pay, and my dinner's covered. Holy shit. Because they're generally not being compensated in a way where they can feed themselves properly. So this can actually be a good way to get some calories and nutrition. Or maybe because you're burned out, you just want a big greasy burger, and you know what? Nobody's going to really begrudge you that. Now, you may say back to me, all right, okay, but how about this person skimps on their coffee, doesn't have that avocado toast, and does things like meal prep. Because yeah, you can meal prep, a few dollars a meal. Absolutely the case. But when you're crunching humongously at work, and your weekends are either spent at work, or you basically being a nervous, anxious wreck and basically not being great at your own executive function, something that I will admit to of having happened in my past, are you really going to be thinking, okay, right, time to meal prep, time to work out all the ways I can cost cut? It's very hard because the effort, right? The emotional effort that would go into that sort of thing, that, in this case, is being robbed, at worst, or at the very least, undercompensated by your place of work. Now, to go into these stock options, we have a very, very, very typical Silicon Valley situation. A person with senior leadership found the performance shares unnecessary and even destructive, arguing that they incentivize leadership to cut corners, compromise, and ship products that are not ready to be released instead of doing what's best for long-term value creation. Now, what that is getting at is generally quite simple, right? So imagine you're playing a management game, right? It's Total War or something like that. And maybe you can march your troops into battle, or you can have them run into battle. Running them into the battle will get the job done, and you'll probably win the battle, but you will have made all of your soldiers be fatigued. They'll take more losses in that battle. It'll be a bit longer for them to, get back up to strength. I'm really thinking in a Rome Total War 1 sort of way here. Now, the issue you're going to have then is on the campaign map is, you've taken additional losses. Is that going to be an issue down the line? So it's that idea that, yeah, you can burn a little harder right now at the expense of the future. Doing so usually is going to be a net loss. So if you know that you can just pull a few of these levers in order to hit the same release date that otherwise would not be particularly easy to accomplish, well, I suppose what I would say is this is a great way to, at worst, get yourself in a Halo Infinite-like situation where the head of, like Xbox Game Studio said, go off the rails. That's the worst case. The best case in this scenario is great achievement by your shareholders. Game comes out, game's good. Oh, you've lost a lot of talent. Maybe then you're in a BioWare-like situation where everyone's thinking, where are the games? Oh yeah, there aren't any games because you had to completely reform your company after you lost most of your senior staff. That's why it's taking a long time to make new games. Funny enough, covers Diablo and many other things at Blizzard Entertainment. Now, for these stock options, A quarter of them vest 6 months after the game releases, if an employee stays. A quarter of them vests 12 months after release, if an employee stays. What this is doing is this is saying, okay, you're going to be absolutely screwed a year after release or 6 months after release. So to management, this sets some, headcount increasing deadlines, right? But absolutely that's going to be an issue. Also, if somebody's bonus is only going to be $10,000, there's a decent chance that, at least within the games industry in California, where there's a lot of money flying around, they may be able to hop somewhere else and actually get a little bit of a better deal, which, funny enough, is something that even their own managers will probably agree on, as you'll soon find out. Then the other half is tied to game performance. Now, this is stock. The value of it is not guaranteed, and investing sort of situation like that, very common in gaming, very common in startups, common in Silicon Valley, that kind of thing. Now, I can understand this. It's saying, okay, look, a percentage of how this thing does is going to go to you, all right, because you're working in this thing. But good things compound over time, so we want there to be incentive for you to not jump ship, because we're going to invest a lot of time in skilling you up. It's, all of these things that an employer will think of. And as always, we have to think about both employee and employer. If things are 100% amazing, where it's massive bonus, don't worry, you don't need to leave, or you can leave whatever, well, that could rattle some confidence in one direction. Or then you could say, well, if that employer did a good job of being an awesome place to work, that person's going to stay anyway. It is quite interesting, and again, that's why we get back to the idea of some of these bonuses being inherently a little bit destructive is kind of interesting, because in an ideal world, you don't need any of these things because people are paid and happy because you've done their job. In a way, this is just trying to make up for what you should have done earlier by probably giving them less overall just to make them think they're getting a decent deal. I recommend people think about things in those terms. Okay, then the other thing is, of course, while this is something that is optional, if it is combined with generally poor pay, then it will not feel optional to people. Also, this is a deal people are taking in order to sign up for more overtime, right? Like, this could be working a 12-hour day instead of like an 8-hour day. It could be working a Saturday, something like that. Imagine the office politics that are going to form between those who do and do not sign. I think anybody who even has a cursory understanding of leadership is going to know that, like, problem number one is allowing cliques to form, right? You need to have the team be a team. Friend groups are totally okay, obviously, but if you literally have a situation where it's delineated between those motherfuckers who leave work at 5 p.m. and us who stay here with our blood and our sweat and our tears to make this game great, well, those people are, you could say quite rightly, because they're putting more work into it, they're going to feel like they have more ownership over this game. They're going to feel like they are the upper class of hardcore motherfuckers. But then what's going to happen is the people who are below them, who are not taking it, well, maybe they took it because actually they're financially stable. They don't need the extra money. It is still optional. And they want to prioritize a overall happy, healthy life where they can have an amazing family life, actually know their children, things like this that are very important. Now, those are the employees that in the long term are probably going to be able to go at the marathon pace. So funny enough, you're going to lose a hell of a lot of long-term value in a situation like this. Again, management. Man, it's an interesting topic. Also combined with the problem of people being stuck. Basically, this is an issue that they've had for a long time there, where promotions are rare. It's the kind of thing with promotions, right? What's a promotion for? I would certainly say that you should try to operate like less of a mega stratified thing with, like, your game designer level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And instead, just do it on a more individual basis with people, but just trying to really reward like expertise and really good work. But we have your situation where promotions are rare, where it's a very much job level thing. It's almost like I think about some members of my family who, worked in the social services here. What are you? Are you a grade 6, a grade 7, a grade 8? Because it was just split into grades. It's a funny situation there with the promotions, because if there's a very limited pathway for somebody to move as, say, an artist, well, they're going to jump ship somewhere else where a similar role is going to command better value, because the only way they get more money is via a job title promotion. Instead, I think we need compensation promotions based on performance within a job title. And that's the kind of thing that when we talk about directorial chaos is going to become abundantly relevant. This is what we call foreshadowing in the business. Managers are actually telling their staff that they should quit make a good career jump somewhere else, and then re-enter Blizzard at a higher level if they want a promotion. Yeah. Now, sometimes this can happen because of a fear of promoting people out of competence. Well, as we've realized, all these things demand nuance. So you can't promote people out of competence, but you still need a way. You still need a way to increase people's compensation so they feel like stuff actually makes sense. Or if they want to go for a new title that has more responsibility, that they feel that they can access the training, etc., that they would need for that role in the company. Okay, let's talk about Directorial Chaos. Basically, it's the game initially had two leads. We have Louis Barriga and Jesse McCree. So, according to the employees, McCree was very scattershot with basically his personal interest, and this was troublesome for teams, and he had a tendency to micromanage. Now, there's a version of this that is honestly pretty relatable for anybody. We all have the things that we naturally care about, and if you feel like you have all the responsibility in the world, but you only have so much focus, well, it's very easy to be led astray. Right? Especially if you're in a creative who got into a field because you're a creative, but actually what's demanded of you is robot mode. And that can be a big issue for some people. We also do have that he was fired in the wake of the lawsuit. McCree, in Overwatch, was renamed to Cassidy because it was a reference. We, to this day, do not know what Jesse McCree did. We do know that he was at the Cosby Suite. However, not everybody at the Cosby Suite was doing super bad things. Some people at the Cosby Suite absolutely were, but this is just a situation we have literally no idea what the situation is with Jesse McCree. And to go further in this idea of promoting out of competence, here is a quote from one of Shannon's sources. You could tell that they weren't very confident. There wasn't a lot of vision for the game. They were changing their minds a lot, sometimes without even giving things a fair shot, like over the weekend. This really started to slowly burn people out. So this is where I think about a very important thing, which is promoting people out of competence. This is a horrible thing to do to somebody, right? Because you're throwing them into somewhere where they cannot succeed, or they're not well suited to succeed. Instead, it's a lot better to not view people as just cogs that can take on more responsibility over time, and instead to really think about the person, what actually drives the person, and how best to give them their own personal positive journey that delivers maximum value both to themselves and to you, the company. That's the way to do things. It's a mistake I've made in my life. So, hard learned, but it's important. And the idea of, promoted out of competence itself, it's a turn of phrase. It's one that's a bit mean. Here's a great example. If I suddenly become like Uber CEO of the whole thing, I am promoted out of competence because I'm actually a little bit more following my passions, following what I find really interesting. That's how I can put in a lot of work and get a lot of creative ideas sparked. And that just means that there's maybe roles of a COO or a CEO that I am not suited to. But ultimately, I'm running this business here. And in a way, there's aspects of my job that I'm not suited to. So the next thing that I should do is replace myself. So we now get into a situation here where the skill sets demanded change as you move up the ladder within an organization. If the organization has poorly designed the ladder, because ultimately, if somebody wants to be, say, a programmer, but not a leader of programmers, you need a way that you could feasibly retain that employee for like 10, 20 years. And that's not going to happen if they do not have prospects that don't involve them becoming a team lead. That's a very important thing for businesses to think about, and it's obviously one that I think didn't really go well here. I think this is a situation where these two guys this wasn't their deal. They weren't suited for this. Maybe they were good at the individual parts of whatever previous projects they did, and that's why they got a really good name, so people thought, okay, shit, we're rebooting Diablo 4 again, because of course it was rebooted, the version under Josh, which actually may have even had an over-the-shoulder camera angle. This is years and years and years ago now. But they maybe thought, all right, Josh is gone. We're rebooting the project. Oh, they're top lads. Who knows, maybe even some nepotism occurred, given what we know about the company. And very much on that topic, before the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a weekly beer shower on Fridays ran by McCree for the team to socialize. There's many ways where this is pretty cool. It's like, hey, want to have some, have a few drinks after work. Nice, fun way to, foster the bonds of friendship. But here's the thing. But several former employees said, only beer drinkers, and specifically those bringing the right kind of beers, were comfortable attending. Oh, so what does that mean? Does that mean it's only if it's, the proper good craft, the discerning craft brews, the imperial stouts, the little microbreweries? Somebody who just is having a pint of, Bud Light. Don't do that. Oh man, Bud's not great, but it's okay. If you want Bud, you're fucking welcome. And evidently this is a situation where it felt like a bit of an old boys club, right? Did women think that they get strange comments if they were hanging out here? Or they maybe feel like they're being hit on? I don't know. But these are the sorts of things that obviously a team has got to be very careful about. And we are in a situation where these two people were fired after the DFEH lawsuit, from what we can tell. It certainly is something. It does seem that McCree has, there's the most sus over him. The stuff with Lewis, I think we're at this stage just not sure. But it moves us on to creative direction then. So Sebastian here was brought on to serve as creative director. He was creative director of Witcher 3, head writer for Cyberpunk 2077. From a creative direction and writing standpoint, I think it's generally believed that these games are both excellent. So let's go. His decisions were a source of turmoil for the Diablo team. While the practice of starting work and then scrapping it if it wasn't up to par was common at Blizzard, employees said the D4 underwent a series of particularly disturbing revisions to the script. And later it said, his background was more in cinematic directing than in game mechanics. He approached Diablo 4 from the perspective of taking the whole game and rewriting it himself. Okay, so maybe he's not exactly inspired by games. I would certainly say when you look at the narratives crafted by Blizzard, a lot of the time it does end up being like, yeah, this is clearly game designers trying their best at a narrative. And that's why it ends up being a bit lame, but also very cheesy and sometimes very, generically epic, which ends up actually just being a bloody good time sometimes. Of course, when people think about The Witcher 3, they're probably going to think about the Bloody Baron. Complex character, complex situation, written well, acted well, went down very, very well with the players. This is where we do get into a more contentious thing. Of course, it's a word that I am going to soften down for fairly obvious platform-related reasons. By 2019, many employees were disgusted by a version of the game script that repeatedly mentioned the violation of a love interest and referred to this female character as the violated woman as her primary description. He'd spent months working on the script, penning it in Polish, and having a translator change it to English, according to several employees. People pleaded with Blizzard to revise the story, saying that said violation has no place in a Blizzard game. Many expressed discomfort at the idea of adding said violation to the game in what was perceived to be a considered effort to make D4 feel grittier and tonally darker than the previous game, rather than engaging with the subject in a sensitive way. And I think before people maybe go too quickly to the comment section, rather than engaging with the subject in a sensitive way. So if that is something that is happening and is very, very thematically relevant to a story, obviously that has a place in a story. And the Diablo universe is pretty horrible, pretty grim, pretty gritty. Maybe there is a case that a story like this could happen within that game universe, that secondary world. However, is Diablo 4, the loot-driven action RPG, going to be the place to discuss that? And that's what we're going to discuss in a little bit. Two employees were called to the post a line in the 2019's version that was written as, "And then she was violated brutally." Employees would repeat the punctuation, comma, period, out loud to each other, alarmed by the direction. Violation has no place in the Diablo universe. It's not a thing that we should be tackling because it requires, or because a certain amount of, nuance and a deft hand is required. So I think this is the case. There's perhaps people here where if there was nuance, if there was a deft hand, then it could have worked. Now, this whole thing was rehauled, removed, that character was cut. A Blizzard spokesperson said that this happened 3 years ago under different leadership as a character backstory, not as game content. At the time, it was deemed inappropriate. They went in a different direction. So, as I've put here in my notes, oh no, it's time for nuance. Can this topic be explored in media? Absolutely. Can it be explored well in media? Absolutely. Can it be explored badly in media? Absolutely. Here's a movie that I absolutely loved It's one of my favorite movies in a long time, but one that I'm glad to have only experienced once, is the way that I would put it. It's a movie called The Nightingale. I really do think it's fantastic. The same director as the movie The Babadook, which I think is one of the all-time horror greats. I suppose worth mentioning, is directed by a woman, and it does have, and I have watched this movie with my girlfriend, and I mean, yeah, those scenes are tough going, and I had a bit of a chat with, and her thought was like, oh my god, that was horrible. Also, oh my god, that is horrible when it happens, and it does look like that when it happens. This is terrible. Also, this is the sort of thing that soldiers do when there is poor leadership, etc., etc., etc. We all know various atrocities committed by, armed forces, many countries, all over the world, all throughout history. Kent defended the decision to show such violence, saying the film contains historically accurate depictions of the violence and racism which is inflicted upon the Indigenous Australian people of that time. It was produced in collaboration with Tasmanian Aboriginal elders who asserted that it was an honest and necessary depiction of their history and a story that needs to be told. Kent said she understands the negative reactions, but stated that she remains enormously proud of the film and stressed to audiences that the film is about a need for love, compassion, and kindness in a dark time. I think it's an incredible movie, a very powerful movie, and one where all of these things feel horrible and absolutely appropriate. It's why I said it's a movie I'm glad I watched it, I'm glad I experienced, and I'm also glad I experienced it only once. But my point is, when we're talking here about preferences in a movie, I think that just about anybody could say, well, the issues as it pertains to race and and sex in this movie are they're fairly brutal. The character that you could see to be perhaps the more heroic character, the lead character here, she's Irish, and whenever she meets somebody with a different color of skin, being who she is from the time she was in, has an immediate, very racist response. Now, as time goes on, some understandings begin to happen, and it ends up being a really fantastic story. But that's the sort of thing, you're like, oh wait, the hero of the movie is saying those words. Whoa, oh wait, yeah, that's the point. It's actually, things are nuanced. And we start to think it through, and I suppose we learn and we grow, and it's one of the great things that media can do. Now, here we are having a little bit of discussion about, an art movie, basically. Because I think it is more that. I mean, even the way that it's shot, the way that it's marketed, small, all of that. It's that sort of thing. Now, if you're going to basically use that form of violation as a narrative Duplo block that you're going to smash into something else. I remember somebody that I know, they said that whenever they were younger and they were constructing stories with, like little toy soldiers and action men, they didn't understand what sex was, but they knew it was really important to stories. So they'd have characters bash off each other before one of them would be killed, because while he didn't really understand what they were doing, kind of knew it was important. Kind of funny, right? Innocence of a child. Very funny, but it's an idea of using that concept as a narrative Duplo block, rather than something with, with nuance, with care, with tact. And it does seem that people don't really believe that, this sort of thing was going to be happening here. Now, if that sort of thing had maybe happened in The Witcher, a game perhaps more set up to tell a more nuanced story, then, yeah, perhaps so. But again, if you look at, almost any Blizzard story in most of history, they smash those narrative Duplo blocks together and have a lot of fun doing so. And it makes it, not powerful art, I would say, but very likable, very enjoyable, very consumable, and I think that's why we all got into this in the first place, with that company's games. And there's nothing wrong with saying that something's not high art. It's not its job, and that's okay. But it does mean that there's maybe some bits of subject matter where it's not going to find as much success. And if it's being done in a tone-deaf manner, that's going to be a real big challenge when you are leading a team. And I would say this has to be done with care, especially if you are a man. And I say that because, I'm an average height man, and I'm a bit overweight. But I guess that means at least I could run into somebody fast and, force equals mass times acceleration. But the point is, versus most people in the street, I mean, I'm going to be taller than almost, every woman in the street. Most men will be. we are not used to the idea of going for an evening walk and actually having that fear existing. That's a very alien concept to us. Now, maybe if you found yourself in a dodgy part of town and you're like, oh, sure, looking over your shoulder, not really knowing what's going on. So that sort of feeling for a lot of women in a lot of places in the world, that is close enough to their default. You know? And that's, I think, the change in perspectives that you need to think about. A while ago in this city, somebody was going around with like, I think it was like a machete or something on a bicycle attacking women. Pretty crazy. Now, did I think about that for a second when I was walking about to the shops? No. I didn't. Because it was like, oh yeah, whatever. You know, it wasn't targeting me, and I mean, it's probably just some weird smake on a bike. It's fine. I'll deal with it. You know, I have mass on my side. It was a very different reality for a lot of people that I know. And I suppose it's one of those things as men, we have to deploy empathy here to understand that people are, you could say, almost existing from a pretty different perspective overall. Care and nuance, bloody well required. And this is one of those situations that will have spooked employee confidence, and that's rough. The next thing then, game development, World War I style. Oh, just send more boys over the trench. It'll work this time. So, release dates for this game, according to the sources, include January 2021, December 2022, and December 2022 was the release date for this game after its 2019 reveal. Internally, developers appealed for more time. This time they won. But I would say, have you ever heard about a project called Warcraft 3 Reforged? You know, one that was announced with a ludicrous release window at BlizzCon. That was then, after the employees basically probably had to run around in circles screaming for a while, that was then kicked back, but in a way that just led to utter desolation and destruction, and that game still being a state. Then it was going to be April 2023. This, in fact, is a date that was quite recently leaked. And now, of course, June 2023, the actual release date, which does mean the employees have got a few more months. However, they say that this is hard. We're at the point where they're not able to delay the game anymore, said a current Blizzard Albany employee. So we all just have to go along and figure out how much we're willing to hurt ourselves to make sure the game gets released in a good enough state. Now, I would say to you, everybody, how often is good enough what we get? Not brilliant, not perfect, but good enough. Happens too much? Take a look at, say, Callisto Protocol. I mean, there you literally had the full recipe for awesomeness, yet it had a lot of launch issues and a decently crunchy situation. And there was no New Game Plus at ship. What if that game was maybe, instead of, 75s average, it was getting 85s because it had 4 or 5 more months in the oven? It would be a different story for that IP. It would be a different story for the fans of that game who are showing up, wanting to love the world that those developers were creating for them. Yet it was betrayed because it was released in a good enough state. And it is a good enough state. The game's shipped. Sold probably plenty of copies. Good enough, but not great. Not what creates the next big IP. And that's the problem, as the staff say. A game like D4, it just takes a long time. A lot of assets. A lot of content. Growing while maintaining Blizzard quality. You can't do both super fast. We then have Rod Ferguson. So Rod, of course, he in the industry is known as a shipper. The guy that you just get to come in and make your game be a reality even after things have went up shit creek. Here's a quote. People got frustrated because we all thought he was going to come in and fix the game. And then when nothing happened, that's when you started to see this massive turnover. Again, at the top of this episode, I said that it seems from the article that it's really within the last year that they've been struggling. It seems, good times are just around the corner. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Oh, look, we've got Rod Ferguson coming on. Oh no, there's more and more overtime. Oh dear, wait, Rod's here. Why is it not better? And then people just start to realize, you know what? Screw it. I'm not going to have to kill myself for this. How about I just go over to Riot? Which, for plenty of people, is an option. And here's what's really rough for a company like Blizzard. That's not an option for their average people. It's only an option for their best people. Which means that their average people are stuck burning themselves out which means that it's going to be harder for them to engage in personal development to grow within their job, while they lose the people who are the leaders, who are the more senior staff. Not only are you losing their incredible labor on the game, but you're also losing the trickle-down effect of skills and mentorship that they can bring to the more junior employees. This is exactly what causes a company to rot from the inside out. Now, Rod hosted a weekly production meeting with like hundreds of staff. It was called the Rodcast. Unfortunately, though, he tended to ramble about celebs that he met, discussed movies. Some people said that they felt he was just a big old clout chaser. He was talking about the previous companies like Epic that he was with. Now, he would try to address issues with team health and attrition. Overall, it seems that these people aren't giving him a good review. They're not seemingly saying that he's a super bad guy or anything. Maybe he just thought it would break the ice, make him feel personable if they're like, movies! People you know, movies you like. Maybe it backfired. So I don't think it's that he's a super bad guy. It's just that he's not really seemingly delivering the results that people expected. And it seems that for a lot of people, that's when the morale dissipated. But if you want morale to dissipate, this next story is a masterclass. Vicarious Visions have an amazing reputation. The thing that they shipped before becoming Blizzard Albany was Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remastered. Absolutely beloved. And they've done a lot of great work in the past. The leader of their company, Jen O'Neill, was in fact going to be a co-leader of Blizzard. She was co-leader of Blizzard with Mike Ybarra for a few months. Mike Ybarra, who joined, he'd been in Microsoft for a long time. He was leading up Battle.net. By all accounts, good enough job there, good stuff. But she was not being treated equally. Now, I believe the story came out that Ybarra had refused to take a higher wage than her, which is a good thing. But ultimately, we don't know what happened internally, but she left. Activision donated to a women's charity in a big piece of performative bullshit that I think really everybody just saw as transparent. Here's $2 million for women happy good. Women gone? Women happy good money. It's fine. I think just about everybody saw through that, right? Especially, we also have to think about optics here. So you've got her, LGBT women in leadership, who is... she's been in the industry for a long time. She, in fact, worked her way up from quality assurance. She has a fantastic reputation, especially, of course, with the team that she will have led. So, thematically, driving her out, given the sorts of flack that they were getting, that was generically the bad strategic play. Now, I get it. Someone in the comments may scream, being like, you can't, just because of her sexuality, it doesn't matter. It's... No. Like, you got to consider things they were under fire for. And even if you're going to be as cynical as you could be about this, well then, add to your cynicism the idea that incurring bad optics is a fairly bad strategic move. So they made a bad strategic move. I think a lot of people would also say they made a pretty morally bad move. They evidently pissed this person off and treated them poorly. Now, this is bad because she's the leader of Vicarious Visions. Vicarious Visions, who you're planning to rename to Blizzard Albany. And if you've been in Vicarious Visions for, let's just say, 10 years, you're Vicarious Visions. You know your company logo. You have a mug with that logo. You're the Vicarious Visions crew. Oh, now your mug says Blizzard Entertainment on it. And they're the company you read all the bad things about. Bad morale. So the staff are going to feel messed around. They're going to feel like, wow, our leader was betrayed. This probably does not, they can't even treat her right. What the hell are they going to do to us? And just that feeling of betrayal. And then, of course, the problem of slamming two teams together. There's a story one of them goes into here of having basically what amounts to two forms of Battle Pass. And they were being worked on separately. One of them was like your seasonal journey. The other one was the Battle Pass. Then they realized, hang on, shit, these are the same thing. So they cancel one of them. And it's like, that's just terrible planning. That is your left hand and your right hand not talking to each other. You wanted to go and make a cup of tea. Now, you've made 2 cups of hot water. What good's this? 2 cups of tea, but still, not good in this situation. And it does make me hope, as a World of Warcraft fan, who, to be honest with you, is absolutely chuffed by the state of Dragonflight. I really think it's an incredible expansion. I think me and a lot of my friends who, we have been amongst some of the most cynical out there, right? We have reported on every bad thing within World of Warcraft, but we're playing Dragonflight thinking, bloody hell, I haven't had this much fun since Legion. Wow, this is great. I feel like I'm back again. It certainly makes me hope that the acquisition of Proletariat is going a little bit better. At least they do have a lot of MMO staff, or staff who had MMO experience, I should say, and they were working on a fantasy game. So you would very much hope that, and I think they had some broader ambitions too that involved work in the fantasy genre, so you'd maybe hope it's a better fit, rather than from the perspective of Vicarious Visions, where they lost their name, they know they are bodies being thrown at a problem, it's not the company they signed up to work for, it's not the IP they signed up to work for, and the person that they respected, who has been a leader at their company for a long time, was treated poorly. So overall, this leaves us in a funky position. Just before this, I watched SkillUp's review of D4, and of course the first thing he says is, do not trust them an inch, look at Immortal. Everyone's going to say that, and they should, because it's true. He also said that the game's looking bloody brilliant. And that said, from what I saw of his gameplay, and people have, I've seen and talked to have been in that closed beta, woo, yeah, it's good. Oh, it's good. Looks really good. Skill system looks pretty dope. Animations are nice. The world, oh man, the world of D4 looks awesome. Did you see that trailer they released? Like, man... That is, isn't it the first thing that I think in the Bible or whatever that angels are supposed to say or whatever is like, be not afraid. I think the idea is like, I'm not trying to say this from I don't know, theological perspective or anything, but like, look into biblically accurate angels. Spooky. I'm fairly sure, actually, if you look at the big fin squid, it's one of these big, deep sea squids. That's very, very rare, and we've only just discovered it 20 years ago, and footage is extremely rare, but it moves in this way that to our human mind is so horrifying. I mean, you think about creatures of the deep that are going to snatch you and drag you into the depths and you'll never be seen or heard of again. You think of that squid. And I saw man, hang on a second. Have they used that squid's terrifying spindly tentacle things as an animation reference for Inarius as he moves? Oh, beautiful. That's Diablo, man. And then you hear this. So, what do I think? I think this game's not going to live up to its full potential. I think it's probably still going to be a very good game. That's it. I think that they probably will throw bodies at the problem. They have. They're going to burn their staff out. They're going to incur all of these problems. And they're going to release, I think, a very good game that will sell very well. And that's kind of the problem. A lot of people want to work in games. A lot of people are willing to not be treated great. What do we do? That's the situation we actually end up in. Just about every brilliant game has a big crunchy period. I think it's only really a modern thing that there's some studios who are really trying to do a better job here. Of course, Respawn comes to mind. Apparently, Fallen Order was made in a pretty much crunchless situation. Apparently Insomniac don't have big crunch going on, and look at how many games Insomniac are making. This will only last for so long. You've had to rely, number one, you rely on organic growth. How many staff are you attracting? Okay, shit, that's not enough. Okay, now we need to rely on inorganic growth. Mergers and acquisitions. Where do you go from there? Do you just go into more and more outsourcing houses? Can do that. Might be a tricky way to make a game if you're over-relying. Apparently. 343 Industries was humongously reliant on outsourcing houses, who often do absolutely fantastic work, but it does expose production to certain risks, and 343 were more exposed to those risks than most companies in this industry, according to employees who spoke to the press. And where do you go from there? You go to a version of Diablo 4 that has a Halo Infinite problem, and that's really fucked. Because they managed to kill Halo. If they manage to kill Halo, they can manage to kill Diablo. It does seem, though, that with the seasonal content of this game and the seasonal content of Overwatch 2, throwing bodies at the problem has worked. My question is, for how much longer? How much longer until seasons feel smaller, until content feels rehashed, until that spark, that intangible factor of an amazingly crafted game is no longer there. Tell me what you think about this story. Very interesting one. Absolutely wonderful reporting from Shannon. So, it's a pity we couldn't just ride high on, Skill Up and everyone else saying, hey, this looks really good. But we do have to live in reality, unfortunately. Have a great day. If If you want to check out another video, check out this one.